Morning, y'all. Sky Moss, upstate New York. I'm fortunate enough to teach history as a living. And I wanted to reflect on Juneteenth today. Make this video real quick. This is going to be a little longer. I made a shorter one that many of you have probably seen. And I prefaced that like I'll preface this. I've been motivated and inspired and awestruck by the efforts and the energies of young people in these last 2-3 months. Now, it's not like they hadn't shown up before that, but this movement of change that is identifiable and visible and actual is a byproduct of their energies, their success. I applaud them and I envy them. And like Chappelle said in his recent special, if you listen to it, people my age, people turning that corner on over the hill, we're in the back seat, and y'all baby driving, and you whipping it, and keep whipping it, and we'll be right there when you need us. But you're doing great, so keep doing great. So I wanted to reflect on Juneteenth, and my historical mind is trained obviously in the Western tradition, so I understand the chronology and the episodic normalism of American history, but I never gravitated towards that. I took those classes to get those grades so that I could experience history on my terms. And so when you talk about Juneteenth, to me, you're talking about Texas. We talking about Texas? You talking about Texas? You're talking about Texas. So I think a lot of folks will celebrate Juneteenth this year, and by celebrate I mean pay attention to it or post it on one of their social media identities. maybe a hashtag here or there. And that's fine. Don't get me wrong. That's fine. But you're seeing like more interest in attention to black people and black history than we've seen in a long time. So as somebody who's lived this and been fortunate enough to communicate this as broadly as I can to an audience, here's my perspective on Juneteenth. So the etymology of the word Texas is interesting to me. So this is a long road. Listen, this is a long road. If you get bored quickly and you don't like diversion, like you don't watch soccer, you don't like opera, end this right now. So the family circus on Sundays and the comics, when you saw like Joey take that meandering route, that's where I'm going. So the etymology of Texas, we're told, if you Google it, it's the friendship state. It's allegedly from the indigenous folks, the Caddo, the term tejas, or friend or friendship. Well, recent scholarship by Jorge Luis Garcia Ruiz tells us that that's probably not where it comes from, which is interesting. So the book that he wrote is called Texas: The False Origins of a Name. Pretty simple, straightforward title, right to the point. In his research, it's more likely that the word Texas is a really, really old Spanish term that kind of essentially translates to bald trees. Most likely cypress trees on the river that today we call the Neches or Neches in Texas. And Hernan de Soto probably named it that way back when. And then you just had all these bad stories and anecdotes and translations and sloppy oral history inspection by historians. And so the whole idea of the name Texas is kind of a bastardization. They call themselves the friendship state. I'm not really buying it. So the idea, the area of Texas was a buffer zone. The Spanish needed Texas to keep the French from being too ambitious moving west, right? So in 1685, there's this dude, René Robert Cavalier de Sales. René Robert Cavalier de Sales. My French is horrible. He had a settlement in eastern Texas, 1685, That showed the Spanish that French ambitions extended well beyond Baton Rouge, the NOLA. And so the Spanish started population manipulation, pushing folks into that territory, to create a buffer to keep French ambitions where they were. The War of the Quadruple Alliance in 1720 didn't settle anything. And then by the time you get to our revolution, 1776, our revolution, the Spanish issued the Provincia Internas. Provincia Internas. Yes? So the internal provisions, what were they trying to do? They were trying to seed and foment growth commercially and physically, like population-wise, within their outer territories. It was a reaction directly to this war between the British Empire and these colonies, and all this change that was fluctuating throughout the entire Western Hemisphere, and it didn't work. It didn't work. So I call it the virus of 1776. It starts in the United States, right? It jumps to France in 1789. It comes back across the Atlantic into San Domingue or Haiti in 1791. And eventually it reaches the Spanish Empire. And by 1810, most of the colonies that the Spanish are controlling throughout the Western Hemisphere are in flux. One of those colonies in the far north in 1810 comes under the leadership of a priest, Miguel Hidalgo y Castilla. Miguel Hidalgo y Castilla. When I think of him, I think of Bartolomé de las Casas, right? Priests who in history have reached this epiphany moment where they want to be good priests. They want to actually realize, that gospel. And so he foments this revolution, the Dolores Revolution in 1810. And by 1821, 11 years later, Mexico, or Mexico, from the Nahuatl, Mexico, as we know it, comes into play. Under the leadership of Santa Anna and Guadalupe Victoria, Mexico is born, 1821, right? Enter Moses Austin. Moses Austin. Moses Austin is a merchant from originally Durham, Connecticut. The youngest of 9 children. Both his parents are dead by the time he's 15. That year, 1776, when he's 15, the Internas provisions that I told you about, the American Revolution, his parents are dead. His brothers and him are hungry. They move into Philadelphia as merchants. They move into Virginia as merchants. And they have some success. And then they're going to move into a new territory, New Madrid, right? New Madrid, and negotiate a contract with the Spanish government. And in 1789, they move into the Missouri territory, right? So what we consider, I shouldn't say Missouri territory, modern-day Missouri is where Moses Austin first goes, 1789. He opens a lead mine. He's a miner with his brother. Some success for 20 years. And then in 1820, the mine is dried up, the lead market's down, whatever. And he goes back to the government in Spain, in Mexico City, and asks for another land grant. They give him one further south, 200,000 acres. And then that motherfucker died. So in 1820 he dies, and his son, Stephen Fuller Austin, Stephen F. Austin, takes over the family enterprise. He still has that contract. But what's so crazy is when Moses Austin dies is when New Madrid becomes Mexico, right? So Spain loses control, Mexico is born, Moses Austin dies, Stephen Austin ascends, and now you have this entire sort of confluence of craziness that is Texas. So at 12 cents an acre, Stephen Austin starts advertising, and by 1835, you got about 7,000 settlers in that territory with all kinds of slaves. The Mexican government's going to try and tell them, a couple rules here. You got to learn to speak Spanish. You got to practice Catholicism. You got to seek citizenship. None of which the Anglo arrivals paid attention to. And so all of that portion of Texas is developed by what they call these presarios, right? So Moses Austin, Stephen Austin, the presarios, this title that affords them tons of land, opportunity, etc. I equate it to encomenderos, yes? The same concept for me that the Spanish Empire used when they settled the New World. So Texas develops as this territory that is ridden with slaves. And of course, in 1846, war breaks out between these Texas settlers, the Mexican government, and, it was really kind of propagated by James K. Polk, the Napoleon of the stump, cat that I love. And not like that, but like mic drop president, right? 4 years in the presidency and got so much shit done. He was a racist bastard slave owner. There's that too. So in 1848, the war's over. Texas is now an independent state. 1850, the whole compromise. Texas a slave state, California a free state. But by the time you get to 1860, on the border of this Civil War, you have 250,000 slaves in Texas. 250,000 slaves in Texas. You only have 4 million slaves in the entire country. 250,000 in Texas. Juneteenth is June 19th, 1865. A lieutenant general named Gordon Granger rides into Texas with 1,800 U.S. troops to tell these Texans and these slaveholders who are profiting beyond belief. This is a crazy figure. You could buy a steer in Texas in 1860 for $10, $15. Take that steer across the Santa Fe Trail into California and sell it for $135, $150. So a lot of these brothers and sisters in Texas, they're working cotton, they're working sugar, but they're also working cattle. And there was a lot of money in cattle at that point. When Granger gets there with 1,800 troops, his job is to tell the slaveholders it's over, game's over. So many of them had run west to escape the reality of manumission, federal manumission. And now, here's the U.S. forces telling you it's up. You think they let their slaves go? You think that was a peaceful, coalescence and conference of, be free, get yours? No. So the summer of 1865 into the fall was horrific and murderous in Texas. Hundreds, if not thousands, of slaves who ran for freedom south to Mexico or west to California or north to wherever were shot, hung. The Sabine Basin in Texas. If you read Leon Litwack's book, allegedly had hundreds of slaves hanging in trees. So Juneteenth is an interesting date, idea, concept. We celebrate it because as black people, we don't have that much to celebrate historically. When I teach African American history, I'm like, damn, that's fucked up. Damn, that's fucked up. Damn, that's fucked up. There's just not an era, a moment, a time where it feels celebratory. So I acknowledge Juneteenth. I'm cool with Juneteenth. Trust me. But I'm also reflective on the reality that there's no date yet established in the United States anthology that represents black liberation, physical liberation, mental liberation, psychological liberation, emotional liberation, gender liberation. There's no date yet for that. That hasn't happened yet. So I take these doses of opportunities to get together with people, all people, but definitely my black people, and celebrate. But at the same time, I'm always cognizant and reflective on, man, when will When will that real date come? So, I went on long. I'm at 15 minutes. But that's how I see Juneteenth. It's about Texas and this, this outer realm escapism of slaveholders in 1865. I'll give you one more nugget on my way out. There's a cat, his name was William Walker, a privateer, whatever you want to call his ass. William Walker went into Central America, into Nicaragua, and seized control of the government under the auspice, on a few occasions, of Southern slaveholders to try to establish a safety realm, a safety net, in case the institution was banished within the United States. So these motherfuckers actually hired a dude to go take over a country in Central America, a territory, in order to hopefully save the institution of slavery. So, June 19th, 1865, we call it Juneteenth. And it's the story of Texas. And it's the story of a reluctant, brutal recognition of national manumission and emancipation in the United States. Again, a reality that we're still striving for. So, I love y'all. Check me out on YouTube. I'm going to be dropping more and more stuff as we speak. I think my mom and dad are on their way over, so I got to go chef something up. Be cool.